Hey guys, welcome back to Pistons Talk Podcast. Hope you guys are having a good weekend. Probably watching some playoff basketball. I know I've been watching playoff basketball all day. I'm like mentally exhausted, but I'm up for this podcast because we are joined by a very special guest. We got Kory Woods of MLive.com. He's a dual beat reporter for the Detroit Lions and the Detroit Pistons, but we're going to be talking about the Detroit Pistons today on this podcast. Kory, welcome back to the show. You were requested again. I'm getting DMs like, bring Kory back on. We need him back on. So had to get you on here again, man.
Hey, that's humbling. So to everybody who has asked for me to come back, greatly appreciated, very humbled by it. And hey, I'm just me. So thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Oh, for sure, man. I always do enjoy talking basketball with you. I feel like we get into some really good conversations, and there's so much that did happen this week that we are going to talk about. We're going to talk about some Stan Van Gundy, Trae Young, president of a basketball operation. So it's going to be a really good podcast. I did not put this in the prep sheet that I did have, but we were talking earlier about just playoff basketball. So my question to you is, looking at just the way that we're watching playoff basketball right now, how many years away do you think the Detroit Pistons are being a top 6 seed? I'm not talking to like playing 9-10 seed. I'm talking about like a top 6 seed where they don't have to play in a play-in tournament.
Woo! That is a very good question. I'm not trying to stall here, but if people are not going to like my answer, but it's the truth. I think we are first off, we're going to get into this later, but I think it all depends on what's really about to happen with this power struggle, this dynamic in the front office. So that's right there. But if I let's just say things were the status quo, I mean, we're talking about maybe 4 years, 3-4 years before I believe they're a top 6 team. I mean, you have to really look at what is going on with the Pistons. They have not won 25 games, I believe, since Dwayne Casey's first season when they went 41-41. That was the last time they won 25 games in a season. Yeah, they have not won, and they haven't won 25 games over the past 4. It's 82 games in the NBA season. The Pistons have won like 74 over the past 4 seasons. I don't see how you can look at this roster, this organization right now, and say, hey, we make this move, we're right back. This is going to be an ugly process. I think if they get the right front office in there, they make a couple of trades. Hopefully for the Pistons, if some teams decide to break up their payrolls in the offseason, who knows? Maybe they might be able to flip some of their guys for, some guys departing on those other teams. All hypothetical. But, I mean, right now, just looking at it, I would have to say about maybe 3 or 4 years. I would lean more towards the 3 because I think if you're talking about 4 years and you have like a whole new regime, you're starting to ask some questions. Okay, like what are we really doing as an organization?
I saw that tweet from Ant Wright, so shout out to him because he was watching playoff basketball much like us, and he was just saying like, man, the Pistons are so far behind of the curve of playoff basketball, and I said 3 years, and I know some people are a little bit more optimistic. We have people in the chat saying 2 years. I think if it's a 2-year window, you're probably saying goodbye to a lot of the young core pieces that the Pistons fans like. Because at the end of the day, it's really hard to win with 20-year-olds in this league. I mean, the Oklahoma City Thunder are just an anomaly, and SGA, in my opinion, is probably going to win MVP this year.
Should win MVP.
He should. That's my MVP. I mean, being that young, number 1 seed, like OKC has an incredibly bright future, but I think it's going to be 3 years personally. I think this summer will tell me what the plan is, because the past 4 years, it kind of seemed like they didn't have a plan. It was just stockpiling top 5 picks and putting together rosters that would get you a top 5 pick. But the organization is they never really have told Pistons fans or media what the long-term plan is. It's just like it's a restoration, right? Like you never really got a cut and dry answer. But for me, I think it's 3 years, 4 years. I think some Pistons fans would be absolutely irate. 2028, they started rebuilding in 2020. Like I don't know, man. Like they should be competing because you look at teams like Orlando, you look at the younger teams. I mean, they turned it around pretty quickly. But you also have to remember they had some assets to, fast track the rebuild where the Pistons had to start from, ground zero from scratch. Not making excuses. That's just kind of what happened. But I think 3 years for me, I think is where I could see this team possibly being a top 6 seed. You got to hit draft picks and you have to make smart free agency decisions.
And I think the thing is, it could be 2 years. It really depends on what's going to happen with this hire for the president of basketball ops and what's going to happen with the future of Troy Weaver. I'm not trying to rag on Troy Weaver, but if you go off of let's just set aside the draft picks for a second, because outside of Killian Hayes, I believe that Troy Weaver has been a solid drafter. But when you talk about his free agency moves and his trade moves, they have been very underwhelming. I would say probably the best move he's made via trade for the past couple of years was the most recent one when he landed Fontecchio from the Jazz. I think that is a guy that I don't know if he's going to be a long-term starter, but I think that is a guy that could be a definite piece off the bench moving forward. If they can improve at that wing position, go ahead. I think Fontecchio was a really great land for him, but outside of that, it's been a lot of former lottery picks that did not pan out elsewhere. You're trying to make it a reclamation project. Well, here's the thing. Are you trying to restore former lottery picks or are you trying to restore the Pistons?
That's a bar. I love that.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, are we trying to restore the Pistons or restore former lottery picks? And it seems like he's been trying to restore more former lottery picks as opposed to the Pistons, because you're bringing in guys that did not work out elsewhere. Marvin Bagley didn't work out. Kevin Knox didn't work out. James Wiseman, I'm going to say he didn't work out, but I will say this. We've seen better of James Wiseman over the back end of the season from the work that he's been doing with Mark Bryant. I've seen it every day after practice. If you like the guy or not, James Wiseman is actually putting in that work. So I'm not going to go too hard on him on that in that context. But what about RJ Hampton? Didn't work out. It's just bringing in guys that were names when they came out, but yeah.
Yeah, Dennis Smith Jr. I forgot about that one.
Dennis Smith Jr. Yeah, another one.
Even though Dennis Smith Jr. actually locked down defensively. Over the last 2 seasons, he's been a better defender. I will give him that credit. But to your point, yeah, you look at the Josh Jacksons, the Dennis Smith Jr.'s, all the former high lottery picks, but none of them have really panned out. I think Chauncey Billups, if you look at the Pistons history, he's kind of the anomaly, but you have to consider who the head coach was at that time. And Larry Brown, in my opinion, is one of the best NBA coaches of all time. And I think Chauncey just had a really good teacher of the game to teach him how to play that point guard position. And I wasn't too mad. Yeah, I wasn't too mad with the projects that Troy tried to bring on. You're rebuilding franchise, I get it, but none of them really panned out. It seemed like every year we were trying to take on projects outside of this deadline. We didn't really take on a quote unquote project. I wouldn't really count Troy Brown Jr. as a project or anything like that.
Yeah,
this was the first off.
The latest trade deadline, I think that was more so of, look, we just got to do something. And what they did was they brought in some new energy. Didn't really translate to a whole bunch of wins, but you saw them play marginally better. But even outside of the reclamation projects, this is out of Troy's mouth, so I'm not making anything up. the fact that he admitted they had better trades before for Bojan Bogdanovic and Alec Burks, and they didn't pull the trigger on them until recently, that's a red flag. The fact that Killian Hayes started this season over Jaden Ivey and wasn't even released or moved, that's a red flag, because you've seen 3 years of this guy. And he's shooting sub 30% from beyond the arc and almost sub 30 from the field. What more do you need to see? So he's some of those moves, again, not saying whether the guy needs to go or not. I'm just saying some of the moves, they didn't go according to whatever his plan. Like you said, the plan wasn't public other than restoring the Pistons, but the actual direction of where he wanted to go, it could not have been going 4 straight years of the worst stretch of Pistons basketball in franchise history.
Yeah, I mean, I went in the 97-1 archives. I know it's completely off topic, but you guys can go pull it up. When Stan Van Gundy was arguing with Mike Valenti about tanking, and kind of Stan basically said, he's like, it's easy to, go out and get guys that can, get you 20 wins a year. Like, he's like, anyone can do that. It's not hard. Anyone can lose games on purpose. Anyone can tank. It's not like a mastermind strategy. Like, he's like, all the coaches in the NBA, we know how to win games. It's like, if we didn't, we wouldn't be coaching in the NBA. So I found that really interesting. And, Stan was kind of right in a sense. 76ers haven't been to an NBA finals or even a conference finals yet. So it's kind of funny if you listen to 97-1 The Ticket now, Mike Valenti's anti-tank, but like 6 years ago, he was pro-tank. It's kind of funny how like everyone is switched up in the city lately.
I'm not going to say, here's what I'll say about Valenti. I call Valenti a wave rider to me. He rides whatever wave is going to go for his constituents. I mean, it's because, this is the same guy, we're talking Pistons, but this is the same guy that wanted Jared Goff out of town. Now it's, we've never said a bad word about Jared Goff. So, wave rider. So.
Yeah, I mean, some people pulled up the receipts of him and his co-host saying that they wanted him out, but it's kind of funny. I know that first topic was like just completely like out of left park, but I thought, playoff basketball, why not? I did want to talk about exit interviews. For people that didn't know, the Pistons did have their exit interviews. And obviously they were pretty boring, but there was one player I did want to talk about, and that was Cade Cunningham. And the one part of his exit interview that I was really intrigued with was the comments about the contract extension. So you were there, obviously. What were your initial thoughts of the question that, James kind of sneakily said, hey, like, have you thought about your contract extension? Because his comments were kind of like in left field, in my opinion, just the way like he kind of just said like, hey, like, if I were to get in a car crash tomorrow, who knows? I kind of felt like it was just like really like random to say.
Yeah, I didn't really know what to make of him. It was interesting to say the least, but I really didn't know what to make of his comments. I thought some of his other ones were a little bit more intriguing, but about the extinction, obviously he's thinking about that money. He's up for a sizable payday, and I believe the Pistons, they can pay him more. But just about those comments, I'll be honest, Anthony, I didn't really know what to make of him. I'm still trying to figure out what exactly that means. Maybe we'll find out in the coming days.
I don't know if he lost a loved one or anything like that, but that was just like a really weird thing to say. But I do want to tell people, they don't know, he can sign up to a $225 million contract extension over 5 years. If he makes all NBA, that could go up to $269 million, which is that's a lot of money. In your opinion, do you think that the Pistons are just going to give him that blank check and just give him that $225 million?
They need to. let's just keep it real. I believe, and this is in my personal opinion, I believe there are two players on this roster that I would say need to stay. And with the and I'll say this about the second guy. I would only move him I would only move him if there was a deal that blows your socks off. The one guy you gotta keep Cade. The second guy, Jalen Duren. I think those two players are guys where you need to build around the both of them. I like the chemistry that Cade. I like the chemistry that Cade and that Jalen and Ivy have. Really think that there could be something there with Cade and Jalen. We heard of the work and we saw some clips of the work they did to Team USA last year, and we've seen some flashes out there on the court this year. I believe that JD is still young. You can still work on his game in the low post, still get him more refined. Let's say the same coaching staff stays in place. Brian, the work he's been doing with Wiseman, he's been working with JD, and JD's been getting better. He's been getting better. Still, probably needs to work more on that defensive IQ in the low post, and even get a move he can do consistently in the offense. But I mean, he's a freak of nature. And I say that with respect. I hate using the word freak when describing players. He's a freak of nature. And Cade is just like, if you get rid of him, you get rid of Cade, you have to be getting back multiple picks. And it would be kind of hard to sell because of maybe it might be a hard sell because of their record, but you got to get something back to move Cade. And I don't think you're going to get back the value that you want for Cade if you were to even think about moving him, but you shouldn't. So, yes, in my roundabout long way to the answer, give him the extension and build this team around him correctly.
Yeah, I think that's kind of been my take on it too. Is obviously he's still under rookie contract going into next season, but if you do want to lock him down, you do want to give him that long-term contract, you want to give him that rookie max, you could do it this summer if you want to. I don't know if the organization will. I think it depends who the next president is personally, and what he sees fit, because I think he has a lot to evaluate with this team, not only players, front office, coaches, everything. I think whoever the next president, and we're going to get into it a little bit later, has a lot to evaluate with this team. But
absolutely,
100% agree with you. There was another thing in that Cade presser. I don't know if you peeped it earlier, but Cade said he would welcome on giving his input on roster moves. Do you think that the organization should, ask him about players that maybe he fits better with? Because we saw this year in the starting lineup, I mean, there was no spacing around him whatsoever with Killian Hayes, Asar Thompson and Jalen Duren. It was, going back to the Josh Smith, Greg Monroe, Andre Drummond spacing era days where there was no spacing. Would you be okay with, the organization, consulting him with possibly trades or free agent signings?
Yes and no. I feel that if they make a strong hire in the president of basketball ops, and let's just say he or she decides to go ahead and move in the direction to get a new general manager, let's let the new general manager cook and whatnot. Let's see what they can come up with. But I think, let's just be real. This is the NBA. A lot of teams are going to their star player to see what they want. And who are we kidding? Cade Cunningham is the star player on the Pistons. So you want to keep this guy happy. You do not want him to be one of the first, probably. I don't know if he would be the first. He might be the first to turn down that rookie max. You want to keep this guy happy. So, yes, get his input, keep him happy, see what his inside is, because you brought him in here not just because of his overall game. You brought him in here because he was the most intelligent player out of that draft you could do. So, yeah, see what he likes, see what he's thinking at least. Maybe you don't even go with what he said, but you at least have in the back of your mind, you know what? He said this player, I may not like that player, but I may go get a player that has those traits that I think would be a better fit with him. Because sometimes stepping away from it, those people that are hired those positions may actually know what is better for the player than the player themselves. I mean, you got guys like Michael Jordan, and not trying to compare him to Michael Jordan, saying you got guys like Michael Jordan who wants his certain players to play with him, and Jerry Krause said, no, this is who we're getting. Well, look how that worked out for Jordan.
Yeah.
So I would say you have to find the fine line in between that of taking his input and running with it, or and opposed to taking his input, seeing if it makes sense, and making some alterations here and there.
Yeah, I think to your point, like maybe Cade wants a movement shooter next to him in the backcourt. Maybe they don't get that movement shooter, but maybe there's one that the front office. I'll just use a guy as an example. Maybe they go out and get a Malik Monk. I mentioned it before. I think he's a gettable free agent. Given his exit interview, doesn't sound like he's coming back to Sacramento. I don't know if you saw his interview after the game. It doesn't sound like he's coming back. I mean, maybe they go out and get B- guys to improve this roster. I wouldn't be mad at it personally.
If you're looking at the current free agent landscape, I believe getting a couple of B- guys, maybe one C+ guy, I believe that would be a lot better than going out and giving a max contract to somebody that is not going to move the needle. And if you're thinking about who I'm talking about, yes, I do not think that giving a max contract to Tobias Harris is going to move the needle for this franchise. So if you go out and you get a couple of guys on some smaller deals like a Malik Monk, get him on you might not be able to get him on a player-friendly deal. You might have to overpay Malik Monk a smidget to bring him here. But when you're a 14, 60-8 team, you might as well get ready to overpay a little bit. So, yeah, a couple of smaller signings, a short-term contract to be able to work out, yeah.
I'm glad because we're going to talk about Tobias Harris later in the podcast, but the one thing I will end this topic on is I think Pistons fans, I know they're very prideful, I know they're passionate, but beggars can't be choosers. You just won 14 games. You can look at the free agent list and say, no, I don't want him on my team. I think you have to take some risk and you have to take some lumps, because given where the franchise is currently at, over the past 4 years, you've been the worst team in basketball. You might have to overpay for a role player until the culture gets back to a winning culture where maybe you can get those, hometown discounts. I'm thinking like Antonio McDyess from years ago, until you can kind of get like those kind of discounts. I don't think they're going to get those type of discounts unless a player is really bought in and like really wants to come to Detroit. But I personally don't know any players that are, going to take, below market value to come play for the Pistons right now currently.
Absolutely not. I mean, I think if they would have got somewhere, if they would have been able to get to that 25, 28 game number, they might have been able to sweet talk a couple of guys like, hey, we're not where we need to be, but I think you can put us over the hump. When you are back-to-back seasons, the worst record in the NBA in 4 straight seasons, one of the 4 or 5 worst teams in the league, that is a problem. That's going to be a hard sell. That's going to be a hard sell on guys that can probably make more money with their franchise they're with right now. That's a hard sell on guys that can probably make more money in a warm weather state. You're right. Beggars cannot be choosers. So if you're saying, oh, I don't want that guy, but that guy is somewhat good and willing to take money, hey, the Pistons won 14 games last season. Hey, the Pistons set the single season game losing streak at 28 games. You cannot say who you don't want on this team as a fan. You need, if anybody of any type of talent wants to put on a Pistons jersey, you need to get on your hands and knees and pray to whatever religion, rock. If you don't pray, whatever, just be thankful.
Seriously, man, because I just see a lot of fans that are like, oh, I don't want that guy on my team. Like, we have $60 million in cap. I was just like, well, you're gonna have to overpay for guys to come here. It's gonna be a really.
This is not NBA 2K. You can't override a signing and make him come to you.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't really think we have anyone in this front office that's that good of a persuader or a salesman to kind of talk like a top tier free agent to come here. But like I said, maybe down the line during the future, things can change.
Yeah.
But I did want to get into, because out of all of the articles from the beat writers, I thought your article for the president of basketball operations was the one where I'm like, Kory gets it. Kory gets it 100%. Now, I did make a graphic, and I did want to put the four guys that you did write in your article on the screen for people to see. We can go through it real quick. So you had Tayshaun Prince, which I think a lot of fans really like, especially him being part of that all-4 squad. You had Bob Myers, Trent Reedon, and Dwayne Casey, who I think a lot of fans they saw that name and they're like, why? But
yeah,
what I want you to kind of do is go through each candidate and tell me why you think Tayshaun Prince would be a good fit for the Pistons as a president of basketball operations.
Well, first off, Tayshaun Prince has the experience, which a lot of people really don't realize. He's the vice president of basketball affairs right now for the Memphis Grizzlies. I mean, he lacked the front office experience back then, of course. He was, still a player, but I mean, the guy knows his stuff. He's a well-respected basketball mind around the league. He's been a part of their scouting, their player development, instrumental in the hiring of Taylor Jenkins. And on top of it all, while he may not really have, I don't really want to say he doesn't have any ties to this current organization, but what he does have ties is to the Pistons in general. He's a former player, helped deliver one of their 3 championships, and Tayshaun Prince knows what it takes for what Pistons basketball looks like. I think that if you bring him in here, you will have a fresh young face. You will be able to get some of these older Pistons to come back and help shape the culture of this team. Because when I talked to Rip Hamilton, he said those older guys, Joe brought some of those guys back to say, hey, this is what we're about. This is what this franchise is about. You bring in a Tayshaun Prince, I think that he's going to be able to set that tone and turn it around. And he kind of reminds me of a Joe Dumars in the sense of that he's soft spoken, but he's well respected. I think that Tayshaun is a real sleeper pick.
I would assume if they did bring in Tayshaun, if that is an option, I think they may give him a dual role personally, to kind of sweeten the deal. Because he's VP right now with Memphis. Who's to say they don't offer him like a dual role like Van Gundy had? Not so much the coach, but maybe they make him the GM and president of basketball ops. Maybe that would be appealing to him, but I do agree with you. I think if you look at Memphis and you look at how they rebuilt from, moving on from guys like Mike Conley, Zach Randolph, and Marc Gasol, you look at their draft picks, they've had some really good draft picks. I mean, getting a guy like Dylan Brooks in the 2nd round, identifying Jaren Jackson Jr. as a top 5 pick, John Moran. I mean, there are countless others, Desmond Bane. I'm sure I'm missing, a few other guys that they've drafted over recent years. Memphis always drafts really well, and I'd like to think that Tayshaun is in the war room. He's at the front of it. And I think for Pistons fans, that would just be a home run pick because you're bringing back somebody that gave them great memories from so many years ago. I don't know if it's like a realistic option, but I absolutely love that you did have him in that list. I did want to transition into Bob Myers, though, because I feel like Pistons fans are 50-50 on it. I've seen some Pistons fans saying that, hey, why not? He built the Golden State Warriors, but, there's other Pistons fans saying, like, I don't want this guy anywhere near the front office, given, his ties with Arntello, which I don't even know if there are ties. I haven't even, looked into it. But kind of talk me into Bob Myers. would that be a guy that the organization tries to, persuade to leave what he's currently doing on TV and in the NFL?
Well, I would say this. Here, I'm going to talk into Bob Myers. First off, would he leave TV? Monty Williams wanted to take a year off. What did Tom Gores do? Tom Gores basically offered him a blank check. 6 years, $78.5 million. At the time, record deal for a coach. Reset the bar. Tom, whether you love, hate, dislike, whatever about Tom Gores, he'll pony up the money. If you can seriously get a Bob Myers to come here, write the check. Here is why. He knows what championship basketball looks like. He helped, even though he didn't have a hand in drafting Steph, he had a hand in crafting the rest of that team. He's good. He knows how to lure free agents. Now, he did have the connection with Arntelem back in the day. He interned for him at Coleman Associates, one of their best closers when it came to player negotiations and contracts. So that's also a guy that you want to be able to have in the front office, somebody that is a name that people know and is well respected and can even get those guys on the phone to come into there. I think that you have to at least pick up the phone to do one or two things. Even if you cannot get Bob Myers to come in and be your president of basketball ops and run the whole thing, you're talking about hiring a search firm to look for this next person. You need to get Bob Myers on top of that search firm. You need to get him in there to at least help you guide this process of finding this next president of basketball ops and finding this next general manager. It remains to be seen if it will work out for the Washington Commanders, but they brought him in to come do that. They hired him to come do the exact same thing because he's well respected and he knows the ins and outs. So you at least have to make the phone call. If he hangs it up, so be it. You can at least say, we made the call.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting name. I wasn't too surprised when I saw it. I asked you, it's just like he'd probably have to, walk away from the NFL if he took a, an NBA job, because I don't really think they'd let him do both personally. I don't know if there's rules against that where you can do both, but I think he's interesting.
And on top of it, he did say that he's wanted to step away for a little bit. Maybe he's wanted to step away from everything that was going on in Golden State, but he also said that he would see himself back in an executive role with basketball when the time comes. So maybe that Pistons job could be that time. I don't know how strong his ties to Arn are still. I mean, again, you just want to make sure you get somebody in there that's well respected. I mean, the guy, whether you love him, hate him, or like him, the guy has 4 rings. I mean,
yeah. I mean, you can't. I mean, you can't refute that. You'd be like the Klay Thompson with your 4.
Yeah.
The next guy you had on your list, I'm not too familiar with. Trent Reedon. I know he's the GM of the Clippers. Is he kind of like a under the radar high riser guy that could possibly, work into a front or basketball operations role?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. I think this guy is somebody that you could just like I would leave interview him. I mean, he spent 11 seasons with Cleveland. He was former basketball operations manager. Then he got promoted to assistant GM and vice president of basketball ops. He was a part of that front office when the Cavaliers won that 26 championship. And he then went ahead and went over to the Clippers. And since his time in the Clippers, a couple of teams have been trying to poach him away to be their general manager. The New Orleans Pelicans was one as recently, before he got his promotion. But the guy's considered a well-respected mind as far as his basketball acumen. He oversaw their G League. He oversaw the Clippers G League affiliate process. And the thing about I really like about him is that he's young. He's 40 years old. So again, he's well regarded for his talent scouting and his leadership. And I know fans may not like this one, but former Pistons coach Lawrence Frank loves him and has been doing his best to keep him with the Clippers. So again, it will be an underrated. I think it will be an underrated move. A guy that's on the rise.
Oh, for sure. Like, I'm not gonna like act like I've seen or heard his name. I really haven't. This is actually like the first time I've read about him this week. I was like, I've never heard of him. Wanted to educate myself a little bit. So I just assumed he was like a high riser, worked his way up the ranks.
Yeah.
So that's good. I mean, maybe you want to take a shot on a guy like that, but kind of given who the owner is, I don't really know if you could sell him on a guy that's not a household name. And I think that's where you kind of have to like look at it too from a Tom Gore's perspective is I really haven't seen him hire someone that isn't established or has like that, that name.
And again, that might be something they need to break away from also as well. Just going away from the typical hot guy and like, oh, hey, I know him. Let me grab him. That doesn't mean it's going to be good for what you need as far as the makeup of your team. So when I was looking at Trent, when I was looking at some names who would make sense, I'm like, maybe this guy could be this could be one of those. Hey, where did you find this diamond in the rough at?
Yeah, I mean, when the Pistons hired Malik Rose, like no one knew who that was a few years ago, and he found them Christian Wood, who was in and out of the G League, and Christian Wood had a breakout season with Detroit, and he's been on several teams since then. Like maybe it could be a guy like that. You never really know. The last guy on the list, I think a lot of people are familiar with. He was the head coach of the Pistons for a few seasons, Dwayne Casey. Talk the fans into Dwayne Casey, why he would be a good fit, and why you think he could possibly be a president of basketball operations.
This one is actually be the easiest one, actually, be quite honest. So first off, I want to tell people this. Dwayne Casey, the coach, and Dwayne Casey, president of basketball operations of the Detroit Pistons, would not necessarily be mutually exclusive of how they operated. You have to remember this about Dwayne Casey. When he came here, he was supposed to be given a playoff team. He was supposed to be coaching a playoff team for years to come. Like almost immediately after the 41-41 season, the Pistons initiated a rebuild. Dwayne Casey wasn't supposed to coach a rebuild. Dwayne Casey was not supposed to coach the cluster, that he had to. But he made the best out of it, and he was a great ambassador for the team. And he was well respected and he's well liked by his players. Dwayne Casey is well respected around the league. Everybody talks about how smart he is. And he's a great ambassador for the team as well. He's who knows what his role right now is in the front office. We know he's in the front office, but you always see him around and he's still that guy. I think Dwayne Casey, as a president of basketball ops, would bring a certain decorum and respect back to the team. Not saying necessarily lacks it right now, but he has a direction and a vision of how basketball should be played. And I think that he would be able to really put his fingerprints on the team in that role. I don't count what happened to him as a coach against him. Yes, coaches are responsible for the on-court product. But when you're given an on-court product that really isn't that it really is not going to progress towards winning, how are you expecting him to make chicken salad out of? Yeah. So again, he has the experience around the league, he has the ties, and I think Dwayne Casey would be a solid choice as president of basketball ops. The one thing I would say that would be really interesting about it is Troy Weaver was his boss. And now he becomes Troy Weaver's boss. So that would be an interesting dynamic right there.
Yeah, it really would. I think the one thing about Casey that fans maybe it's kind of under the radar, they haven't really looked into it, is to your point, Casey coached for several years as an assistant, got his coaching break in Toronto. He has a good eye for talent. From my understanding, Casey's role with the front office is basically scouting and, in the scouting department, looking, this upcoming draft and, going to events and stuff like that. I will say, I think Casey's voice is a voice that Tom Gores respects. And, maybe Casey could say, hey, I just don't think that, Troy Weaver is the man to be a general manager anymore. Maybe we put him in the scouting department. Because I was talking with the fan earlier. I don't think because people think Troy is just going to get canned and get fired. I think Tom Gores would want to keep Troy Weaver because he spent so much time, energy, and effort bringing him in the front office. I think they would like to keep him maybe in a more natural role as a talent evaluator, as a scout. And maybe, you promote Casey as a president of basketball ops, and Casey can go find a new GM. I find it really hard to believe that they try to can Troy Weaver, given what the organization did to try to hire him for several years.
Yeah. Also, too, it would also be like, would Troy take the demotion? Because I believe they tried to do that with Stan Van Gundy, and that didn't work out.
Yeah, the Bauer and Van Gundy era. I know we're going to get into it a little bit later because he did have some very interesting comments about the Pistons' current core in his time here. But I would just tell fans that are watching, that are listening, Dwayne Casey is kind of I would say it's an under the radar name out there. And I think, he has a voice where I think Tom Gores would actually listen to him if there were changes, if there was a trade. I think his voice would hold more weight than the current candidates that maybe they possibly try to bring in.
Yeah, absolutely. It was just a tough sell for fans because, again, you're still keeping a guy. You're essentially promoting a guy that was a part of the second worst record in franchise history. But again, I still would not hold that against Casey because, again, Troy Weaver and Dwayne Casey are coaches. I don't care what anybody says. They're good coaches. They were just not provided with winning situations.
Yeah, you look at Casey's final year, he won 17 games without a Cade Cunningham. And I will say, this isn't a shot at Monty, but I felt like under Casey, the locker room and the organization, just in my opinion, watching the games, watching press conferences, watching the interviews, there was a different vibe and a different, level of intensity, in my opinion, with Casey, where, Casey wasn't mild-mannered. He wasn't even-keeled like Monty is. Casey would swear. Casey would get in your face. And I think that's what's kind of needed right now. Maybe drop an F-bomb once in a while because I think it's needed personally.
And I'm going to be honest with you, too. And I'm not trying to break any news here, or this is just a personal opinion. I'm going to let people go with where they want to on this one. I've seen the way guys have talked about Dwayne Casey. I've also seen the way guys have talked about Monty Williams. It's a difference.
They're not pounding the table for Monty. They're not.
It's a clear difference to me. When you saw Dwayne Casey, when you saw them with Dwayne Casey, it felt like the guys were really disappointed that they couldn't win for him. Like it was really eating them up, but they couldn't get it done. With Monty, it's kind of like it's kind of weird. I haven't really been able to put my finger on this. Like the guys, I'm not saying the guys don't want to win, because again, these guys are not getting on the floor because they want to lose. They want to win, but at the same time, it's just like something is missing. Something is missing.
Yeah, the energy just felt different from my opinion, just my perspective. Because I will overreact and speculate sometimes, but I met Dwayne Casey once. Watched a lot of the interviews while he was here. The players, viewed him as like an uncle, like a dad. And I'll just say, like, even listening to Jaden Ivey's comments when people asked him about Monty, Jaden just didn't seem like himself. He seemed like distracted. I don't know. It just the energy feels different in the building, probably.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, I'll peel back a little bit of a curtain of something I just saw that really stuck out to me during the Pistons season of giving. You know, all the players are around. This is really early on in the things. I just saw the way that Cade and Casey were just next to each other, just laughing it up and joking, and it just really felt like when you see these guys around Casey, it's just like all, you know, wrap arms around them. With Monty, is just like, okay, that's the coach. And again, I could be wrong with that. Again, I could be wrong on that. It's just a perspective.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it feels different. Maybe, you know, they're still getting used to Monty. You never really know. Yeah, I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth or, you know, overreact or speculate. It feels different, and that's to be expected because, you know, Casey and Monty are completely different coaches. And I'll just leave it at that. I don't know if you've seen this across social media. Now, I saw it a couple of months ago, and no national reporter picked up the story, and I was like, oh, maybe it was just a fake trade rumor. But recently, there's been a lot of it's picking up with Trae Young. Obviously, the Hawks, they had their play-in, didn't go as they planned. And I saw an article earlier this week from Bleacher Report, and they said that the Pistons could be a wild card destination for Trae Young. So my question to you is, do you think that trading for a player of his caliber is something that this front office or this organization may do?
That's a good one. I think that if the trade is there, they might consider pulling it. They might consider it. I would have to look at it a little bit more, but obviously, and this is no shade to anybody, you get Trae Young next to Cade Cunningham, there's some spacing. There's what you did. There's a spacing that you are sorely needing, and I mean, who knows? I believe Trae Young and Cade Cunningham could bring out the best in each other. Because again, I don't think Trae Young was necessarily in the greatest situation in Atlanta. He has to be the volume shooter and dominate the ball the way he has. So putting him next to, I mean, you've seen him with DeJounte Murray, but I also don't believe that he's even a Cade Cunningham. So you get him with a Cade Cunningham, you might see a better version of Trae Young, but bringing in the spacing. Also, too, with his volume shooting, Trae will dish the ball, and he's good with the rock. So it wouldn't be the end of the world. You probably would lose some of those young players, but I will say this: I don't think you're going to have a Trae Young and Cade Cunningham backcourt and go 14-68 again.
I think some people, when they look at Trae Young, obviously the defense is not the best. But I think with Trae, it kind of depends who's involved in the trade, because I would assume it'd probably be Jaden Ivey, possibly Jalen Duren, Asar Thompson, who knows. I will say this, that people are listening. Don't be surprised if you see Atlanta blow it up this summer. I think Atlanta's going to go through a rebuild. I really do. I mean, last year they were trying to sell off DeAndre Hunter to the Pistons. They've been in conversations with the Pistons over the past 2 years with trades. If you remember a couple of years ago, it was John Collins, DeAndre Hunter. There have been, it's kind of interest between both teams. I think Trae would be a good fit. It just depends, who are you giving up in the trade, and how much are you giving up?
I'll tell you this much. I told you the two guys I'm keeping. If I were him, Cade, Jalen. Anybody else, we can have conversations. You can't move. Whatever you do when you're making these trades, you cannot part ways with those two.
Yeah.
With JD, you have to at least be getting back a solid big man. But again, I think Cade and AD are the future. Everybody else you can get a little bit creative with because you're going to be bringing in guys. If you're getting rid of those guys outside of Cade and JD, you're bringing in somebody who makes those guys expendable as far as what they provide on the offensive points. So you're bringing in a Trae Young, and you got to get rid of a Jaden Ivey and some other players. Okay, you're bringing a guy that can get you 25 on a bad night and 40 on a good night.
And I think people don't understand how good of a passer he is.
Yeah.
If you watch Trae Young, he's such a gifted passer. Like some of the passes that he can make, he's impossible to guard. I think the Pistons free throw numbers would go through the roof. They'd probably be like a top 5 free throw team with Trae Young on the roster. But to your point, yeah, I mean, to you think that Jalen Duren is like higher on the keep list than most. We were talking to some, I can't remember who we were talking to on this podcast, but they were pretty low on Jalen Duren. They didn't really think much of him. It's interesting that you kind of have him higher on the pecking order in terms of core pieces to keep. I think the main thing with me right now is I'm questioning the defense with him. It's like,
yeah,
are you going to be closer to possibly maybe a Bam Adebayo? Or are you going to be a lesser version of Andre Drummond? Because if you look at their second year numbers, they're damn near identical, except for the free throw percentage. I think JD, he's only 20. I think people need to pump the brakes on that. But I will say the ceiling is incredibly high. If he can untap that potential, he could possibly be a top 5 center in the league if he's a two-way center. And I think, some people maybe lower on him than others, but for the most part, I think Pistons fans are pretty high on him. But getting back to like the Trae Young stuff, I don't know, man. It's interesting. I think it seems like a star player that this front office and Tom Gores would maybe intrigued with personally. I'm sure Monty wouldn't like it because it doesn't seem like the type of point guard he likes.
I would say this, and I'm not. For those who follow me, for those who have heard me on your podcast before, I'm going to say one. I'm going to add another situation on here, but there are 2 teams that need to be monitored. Yes, because we were talking about playoffs. Need to see what see what's going to happen with Phoenix. You need to see what's going to happen with New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
Those 2 teams have incredibly high payrolls, and they are not producing. If the Pelicans and the Suns get knocked out in the first round, I do not see them keeping those rosters together going into next season. I don't see the Pelicans keeping that trio of Zion, B.I., and C.J. McCollum. I don't see the Suns keeping that trio of KD, Bradley Beal, and Devin Booker. They haven't even played this season because of injuries, so you're going to have to move somebody. You're not moving Bradley Beal. You don't know who you're going to get to take that contract. You're not going to move, and then when you go to Pelicans, you're not moving Zion. You can't really move CJ. So you know where I'm leaning towards. The Pistons need to figure out a way to get Brandon Ingram out of New Orleans. I believe that solves a lot of problems. That might be a guy I would consider maybe inserting JD into that trade if you can land a Brandon Ingram, because then you're now bringing in a guy who can literally focus on what he does best, being a bucket.
I know you have mentioned, because I'm going to give you your flowers and credit because we've had you on the podcast several times. You were pounding your fist on the table for Brandon Ingram all the way back in October. I will give you that credit and respect, and I would say I love the New Orleans Pelicans wings. I like Herb Jones. I love Trey Murphy, Brandon Ingram. To your point, that's a team you need to keep an eye on to see what happens, because to your point, that payroll's high. I doubt they're really satisfied with the core they have. Like, nothing against CJ McCollum, but CJ McCollum should not be your point guard. I'm sorry. I think they would love a player like Jaden Ivey. Jaden Ivey in the backcourt with CJ McCollum. Now you have your dynamic guards. Who knows? who knows what you could get rolling with the Pelicans. And they need a point guard. I love CJ McCollum, but he should not be initiating your offense. He just shouldn't. He's more of a movement shooter and just a shooting guard that shouldn't have point guard responsibilities. But maybe Jaden Ivey's a player that they look at. You never really know. To the Suns thing, I think given what they just gave, I can't think of his name right now. They just gave a $70 million extension to
Grayson?
the hell is his? Yeah, Grayson Allen. Yeah, so that payroll's going through the roof for Matt Ishbia.
Yeah.
If they don't at least make a Western Conference Finals, Kory, they got to do something. They have no picks.
I don't think they're getting out the first round.
You don't think they're gonna? Okay.
I think the Suns are going down in 6. I think that Anthony Edwards has arrived, and it is what it is. So be ready, league, because that young man is coming. He's here. When he's coming, he's here. So I believe that the Suns are going to go down in 6, maybe 7, and then they're going to have some hard conversations on what to do. I know a lot of fans are talking about, you can get Devin Booker back home. The Pistons don't have anything on this roster to land a Devin Booker that would. The Pistons, I don't think they have a trade on this roster to land a Devin Booker where you would not have to give up Cade Cunningham. You would have to give up Cade Cunningham in any trade to land Devin Booker. So let that pipe dream go, I would say. But Brandon Ingram, I think that will be a realistic target. Still maybe a little far-fetched, but it's more realistic.
Yeah, I mean, Booker kind of lowered his trade value in the first game. He did not look good. But I do tend to agree with you. I think if you were to try to trade for Devin Booker, you're probably giving up like half of your core. Like you're probably giving up a Duran, Ivy, Asar just to get the ball rolling, because Devin Booker is one of the best shooting guards in the NBA. And Phoenix knows that. Obviously, he didn't do well against Minnesota yesterday, but he's still one of the baddest shooting guards on the planet. Like he's a bucket. He can get you an easy 30 in his sleep. But you kind of have to look at his contract situation. Like, does he sign that extension? You never really know. But we'll see. We'll see what happens with them. I mean, there's so many options. Obviously, we're talking about Trae Young, but we turned it into Brandon Ingram and Devin Booker. You never really know. No, it's all good, dude. I love it. I love the conversation because half of this chat right now is talking about Brandon Ingram and Devin Booker. And that's who they're looking at too. And I think Pistons fans they're an incredibly smart fan base, and they know talent when they see it. And I think Brandon Ingram and Devin Booker they'd be pipe dreams for me. But if it did happen, man, I'd be like running down freaking, Detroit like crazy.
And just so fans know, that number one pick is getting, well, not number one, that first rounder is getting moved in that pick. I believe that they should. I'm of the mindset they need to move the pick regardless. But some people think otherwise. But yeah. Outside of that Trae Young thing, you're probably moving that pick to land any other star.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's going to be a very interesting summer, especially with the new CBA going into effect.
Yeah.
But I did want to transition into a former Detroit Pistons head coach, Dan Van Gundy. He had a recent interview with 97 Won the Ticket. And I wanted to read you some of his comments about missing on draft picks, because I think both of us, I don't think you weren't really covering the team as like a credential media member. This is when you were still a fan. Correct me if I'm wrong. During the Van Gundy era.
I covered the Van Gundy era more so as a photographer that added writing to some pieces, and that was after they got that was after the Blake Griffin trade. Okay. So when that's from the time they landed Blake Griffin, that's kind of where I started, covering the team.
All right. So he's actually talking about this. This is a quote that he had with the ticket, and I'm going to put it on the screen for everyone watching. And this is him basically saying why he didn't succeed in Detroit. He says, when you come into a situation like that, you don't have margin for error. You can miss if you're good. You can miss on a draft pick here and there, but we couldn't afford to. We did, and that's pretty much the reason why we didn't succeed. Obviously, I put Henry Ellison and Stanley Johnson in this graphic next to Stan Van Gundy. And I think he's 100% right. I think when you look back at his drafts, man, that set the franchise back a good 5 to 10 years. If you draft a guy like Devin Booker, if you draft a guy like Donovan Mitchell, if you even draft a guy like a Pascal Siakam, who knows where this organization is in terms of winning or what the roster makeup looks like. But what are your comments or your thoughts of Van Gundy saying that he basically just missed on draft picks while he was here?
I respect honesty. I respect the honesty because it wasn't that he's absolutely right. It wasn't that Van Gundy was a bad coach. He just missed the picks. And he was forced into a situation where he had to trade for a broken down Blake Griffin when the Pistons already had Tobias Harris, even though he kind of no-showed. He kind of no-showed, and well, ain't no kind of no-showed. He no-showed in that series against the Cavaliers. Let's keep it real. But he's absolutely right. Who knows where this franchise is if you need the spacing and you don't draft Devin Booker. You have a Donovan Mitchell who did not miss a shot at his workout, and he's been telling people that I didn't miss a shot. Anytime you ask Donovan Mitchell about it, he always brings it up. So you change the landscape of the franchise by not picking those guys. So you got to respect his honesty. It's exactly what happened. It's really nothing else. I mean, the trades he made, they made sense. The one thing I will say that there was one trade that some Pistons fans liked, some didn't. I think when Brandon Jennings went down with the injury, I felt that DJ Augustin should have been given the reins to go ahead and finish out instead of going ahead and trading for Reggie Jackson. I think that while Reggie Jackson had decent moments here, overall, it was just a bad fit. And when you had a guy like Andre Drummond and you got a point guard like Reggie Jackson, I didn't, the numbers say they were this, but I didn't really see the real chemistry between the two, to be quite honest. So that made that I won't really call that a black eye. I mean, you lose Brandon Jennings, you got to make a move. So, whatever. But yeah, it's his draft picks. That's what it was.
Yeah, I mean, to your point about DJ Augustin, I mean, there's like when Jennings went down, I remember watching the games. He had like 30, 40-point games where like, oh, I think the Pistons are going to be okay. But to your point, I kind of felt like it was a panic move just to trade for another, point guard. And obviously, you can go back and read Reggie Jackson's comments. He thought he was better than Westbrook and stuff like that. And I don't know, man. It was just a weird situation. Obviously, Jennings was starting to figure it out, but that Achilles tear just kind of set the franchise back a little bit. I still think he never tears his Achilles. They never trade for Reggie Jackson, and the whole team could look completely different. But in terms of Van Gundy saying he missed on draft picks, I respect him for like actually saying that. But in the same breath, it's like, like a lot of the players that he drafted were out of the league very soon, outside of like Luke Kennard and, Dinwiddie and others. But like you look at the second round draft picks, like Michael Benajay.
They let go too quickly.
Yeah, Michael Benajay, Darren Hilliard, Henry Ellison, who was a first-round pick. I mean, he's back, I think, playing over in Europe. Like, a lot of his draft picks did not last long in the NBA at all. So I'm glad that that scouting department's no longer with the Pistons because that was just a really weird period in Pistons basketball. But we do have another Van Gundy quote, and this is actually about the core, which I think Pistons fans, sometimes they overvalue the players that they have. And Van Gundy said this about the Pistons' young core. He said Jalen Duren is a very good rebounder. Asar Thompson can defend. I personally really like Marcus Sasser, Jaden Ivey I like. But those guys are all either low-level starters, fourth or fifth starters, or rotational pieces. They need two other guys at least to put with Cade Cunningham to have a chance to get better. So what are your thoughts on Van Gundy basically calling players like, Duren, Ivey, Sasser, low-level starters or fourth or fifth options on a good team?
When you win 17 last year, you win 14 games this year, it's hard to disagree with it. It's some stuff, it is what it is, man. You see the potential in these guys. But I think that is where a lot of Pistons fans sometimes become a little bit irrational. They fall in love with the potential of what they could be in the perfect situation. But the thing about it is, how long are you going to wait for that to come? Sometimes some of those guys never really develop or matriculate to maxing out their full potential in the league. They just are what they are. So as of right now, Van Gundy is right. And this is no disrespect to them. I think he's a little bit off on Duren. I wouldn't say that he's a low-level starter, but I will say that Duren does need to develop. I mean, I think that is very fair to say. But when you talk about Asar, there's been questions about Asar's shot. I mean, we know his defense is there, but in the NBA, you have to still be able to shoot the ball. And we have to be able to see, I mean, he has to be able to hit a shot. And I mean, when you see Asar with their spacing is pretty much non-existent. Jaden Ivey, he's played good in pockets. He's shown flashes of being good, but then he's also shown flashes of being pretty bad. So, I mean, at the end of the day, Van Gundy's right again. I mean, you have to take it for what it is. The coaching, yes, you have to be able to be a good coach in the NBA, but also at the same time, the players have to go out and play. You're not going to convince me that in back-to-back years with two different head coaches that Monty Williams and Dwayne Casey are not good coaches. They both won Coach of the Year. You're not going to tell me that both of them are bad coaches. So it's got to be on the players at some point to go out and play and produce. So, I mean, in that regard, yeah, he has a point.
I think the message was correct. I just think the messenger wasn't the message that fans wanted to hear. Like if this was JJ Redick saying the same thing that the Pistons young core are role players and fourth or fifth options, I don't think fans would have a problem with it. But the fact that it was a former head coach that kind of set the franchise back a few years, in my opinion, I think that's where they have more of a problem with it. Yeah. I will defend the core in this aspect. Like Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren, they're in their second year.
Yeah.
Unless you're just a superstar coming out of the draft, there's not really too many guys coming out of the draft that are solidified first options or second options for that matter. You still have to wait and see what Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren and Asar Thompson are going what they are going to develop into. So that's where I kind of disagree with Stan, but I could understand why he says that. I mean, to your point, 17 wins last year, this year 14 wins. Obviously, we know Monty and Dwayne are, to your point, they've won Coach of the Year. They're good coaches, but they won with mostly veterans on their teams. They didn't win with a bunch of 19, 18, 20-year-old rookies. It's so hard to win in this league with 20-year-olds. It really is.
Because even in Monty's first year with Phoenix, when he had those young guys, he struggled out the gate. And then next year, they got a little bit, we got some veterans around them, and then boom, they started, you start to see some progress out of them. So, yeah, in that regard, I mean, here's what I say. Stan Van Gundy's right to the point where it's just like right now these guys around Cade, if you're looking to win right now, these are not the guys. If you're talking about growing down the line and trying to see where they are, okay, maybe they might develop into something. But here's the thing right now. What did we just talk about with the Pistons? They have not won 25 games in the season since Dwayne Casey's first year. So are Pistons fans going to want to be able to stick it out to see these guys develop, or do they want to go ahead and see the team make a move to see some somewhat instant gratification? Because you can't have it both ways. If you want to go ahead and let these guys stay here and develop, okay, then fine. Let's give them a couple more years, see what they're developing to. Because again, you're right. It's still a really young team, and they're still making some rookie second, third year mistakes. But how patient are you, Pistons fans? Are you going to be patient to see this through, or do you want to go ahead and if the move is out there to make this team better, are you willing to part ways with those guys? Because you can't have it both ways, really. When you're talking about where this team is right now, can't have it both ways. You got to pick.
Yeah, I think that a lot of Pistons fans are divided in that point you made. I think some of them can be patient. Some of them are like, man, it's been 4 years. Rebuild should not take 5 years. You should be at least
it shouldn't.
Yeah, you should be competing for a play-in spot, not competing for a top 5 lottery pick again. But like I said, I think the message was correct. I just think the messenger wasn't the messenger that Pistons fans wanted to hear from, and I can understand that. Final topic I did want to talk to you about, and we talked about this player last time you were on, right after the trade deadline, and it's Tobias Harris. So there was a report this week from, I want to say it was from Keith Pompey from the Philadelphia Inquirer.
Yep.
And he had said that executives believe around the league that the Pistons will sign Tobias Harris this summer. So I want to know, have your opinions changed since the last time I've had you on? Do you think this is a guy that the Pistons should try to go out and sign this summer?
If it involves having to sign him to a max deal, I would say no. I just don't. I mean, I believe Tobias is 33 years old. And look, is he better than anybody they could possibly put into that starting lineup right now in that role? Yes, he is. But do you really want to give a guy that is about to be on the wrong side of 30 at the end of his contract that big of a deal? That's like 17 points a game per guy. Do you want to give him a $185, $200 million deal to come here? Or do you want to go with your special, like you alluded to earlier, and make a couple of B- signings? I think that would be the smarter way to go. Make a couple of B- signings, try to get those guys to come here and some tradable assets to maybe make a splash at next year's trade deadline. And I don't mean grabbing a Joe Harris or Monty Morris actually could have worked out if he didn't get injured. So I don't want to say about that. I think that was just a storm that went bad. But yeah, I don't think that Tobias Harris is going to be the guy. And I know people like, well, we had Tobias Harris here before. They didn't trade Tobias Harris because he was bad. Tobias Harris had got traded because Tom Gores wanted a splash and Blake Griffin was a splash. That's why he was gone, because Tobias Harris was good here. He had some moments. He didn't do that good in the playoffs. He had a little bit disappearing act, but Tobias Harris played well here. So
yeah, I think
right now I wouldn't do it.
I think given this stage of his career, I think he's still valuable. I think he could offer leadership. But to your point, if it comes at a max deal, are you not really concerned with the money and you just want a grown-up in that locker room? And I think that's what the organization does have to ask themselves. They have to ask themselves, are we ready to win, or do we just want to sign vets to keep teaching these guys how to play basketball and how to make winning plays and stuff like that? But personally, just for me, I would probably pass. I'd rather go out and maybe target guys like a Malik Beasley, like a Malik Monk, maybe a look at Hartenstein from the Knicks. or even Nick Claxton to an extent, if you do want to upgrade that center position. I think there are some decent free agents out there where they make more sense and you can use your cap space wisely. I really hate for them to use a majority of their cap space. And like, let's say Tobias has injuries, because it seems like every time we trade for a player, they automatically just get injured. Like, to your point, the Monte Morris stuff was weird. It was 100% weird,
Yeah,
man.
that
Like,
was just because I believe that things might have been a lot different if Monte Morris did not get injured. I'm not saying they would have been playing or anything like that, but I don't think they would have went on. I don't think they would have lost that many games, because you would have already had a solid point guard backing up Cade Cunningham out and not going back to the Killian Hayes experiment that produced the same way as produced the past couple of years.
yeah, I mean, someone said they had a whole under the hood about Monte Morris coming home. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
again, if you can get Tobias on a I'm not going to say if you can get Tobias on a friendly deal, you're going to have to pay him. But if he's not making the $40 million he made this year, if you can't give him that. You can't give him that and talk about improving this team. You're going to have to give. It's going to have to be a very cap friendly deal so you can still make some other moves. You can't give Tobias Harris a max deal and sell that you're serious about making it kind of run, because it's just not the move to make for me. I think there are more creative ways that they could probably come up to land some talent that maybe they may not get that big star, because I'm not really that big of a fan of free agency this year, but they could probably make some smaller moves along the way that will just increase the overall performance. Grab a couple of savvy veteran guys on some friendly deals.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the Pistons, if they were to try to target him, I don't think they're going to get the market value. I know someone said he's projected to be $25 million a year. I think if you're the Pistons, you're probably paying 30, 35 a year, just given the state of the franchise or where you're at. You're going to have to overpay to lure people here. And
if you can get Tobias Harris at 20 to 25 million, you do that. Okay, yes, it's a deal that you definitely got to do. But again, like you said, that 35 to 40, which that's tough.
Yeah, like I said, the Pistons could just sit out of free agency and just make trades. Like, we can be talking about them signing Tobias Harris and they go out and like trade for, like, I don't know, Andrew Wiggins or something like that. You never really know, man. Like, I think there are a lot of teams out there that are going to look to make trades because of the new CBA, and they don't want to get into that first and second apron. I think there are options for this team, but if it's the free agency route they're taking, I'd much rather them go after like C+, B- players, spend that cap space wisely, fill out your bench, get some, mid to, high level role players to, bring to this team. Like, I know I mentioned Malik Monk. I think both Malik Monk and Malik Beasley would improve your shooting immensely. I mean, I'm surprised more people aren't talking about Malik Beasley. I know he's kind of had the off the court issues, but he's had a hell of a season with the Milwaukee Bucks.
Hey, Malik Beasley has some Detroit ties as well. His mom is from 8 Mile.
Oh, okay. I did not know that.
I found that out when I actually shot Malik Beasley's. I shot his when I was for people that don't know, I am also a videographer and photographer. So I shot one of Malik Beasley's camps in Denver, and I was chopping up with his mom, and he's like, "Yeah, she's from the D."
Okay, so there are some ties there. That's interesting. Did not know that. I know when I had Pistons thoughts on this podcast, that was a guy that he wanted the Pistons to go after like 3-4 years ago. Like TJ Warren and Malik Beasley were his guys. I was like, man, that makes sense, man. That makes sense. 3-and-D wings, like you can probably get them for cheap too.
Yeah, definitely. Again, like you just said, bring some of those guys in, guys that maybe they're not max level players, but they're guys that can hoop. You don't want to blow the cap space on a guy that you're locked into on such a massive deal that you cannot move him, and you're going to have to end up buying out at some point.
Yeah, I just fear that they're gonna.
Here.
Yeah, I just fear that they're gonna have to overpay. It'll be like the Ben Gordon and Charlie V stuff, where not the best free agent to target, but the top tier free agents like the Klay Thompsons, the Tobias Harrises. You offer them the bag to try to come here, which I think if I were the Pistons, I would try to stay away from Klay Thompson. Let Orlando give him the bag because apparently that's what they want to do. If I was the Pistons, I would stay away from guys like
Klay Thompson right now is and this is all respect to Klay Thompson because he's a 4-time NBA champion, but Klay Thompson right now is a name. He's a name. I mean, he's on the wrong side of his age, those leg injuries, and I mean, he's showing glimpses of the old Klay Thompson, but the consistency wasn't there this season. And I don't think that, I mean, if you're talking about you're going to have to overpay Tobias Harris to come here, what the heck do you think you would have to pay Klay Thompson to come here?
Probably over 100 million. 100 million straight up.
And you can't do it, and you cannot do it. You can't do it. You would have to pay Klay Thompson something ridiculous to come here that would set the franchise back for years and years and years. So, I mean, if you just had to choose between Tobias and Klay Thompson, you got to choose Tobias just based off of, everything I just said. But I would be out on both of them.
Yeah, I know we talked about it last time you were on. And that was Miles Bridges. I don't really think the organization. I'm just gonna say this. I'm gonna leave it just as a basketball conversation and not off the court conversation because I think that's irresponsible. I think as a basketball player, he fits, but what he did off the court, that kind of nixes it. That's all I'll say.
I still believe, with everything that the Pistons are going through, they are still going through as an organization off the court. If you don't know, do a little bit of Googling. You know what I'm alluding at, and you come off of that, and you have to bring in a guy like Tobias, and I don't want to. I mean, in his off the court situations, I just don't think it's a good fit. Yes, he's a good player. Yes, shown flashes and growth in his game. I mean, he had a heck of a season. But what message are you sending by bringing him here? That's the big thing. Well, what I mean, where do you saying it? But again, if they make that move, they've instantly improved. I mean, they've instantly improved. You cannot argue that. You bring in Miles Bridges, you are a better team than what you were the day before.
I'll just say this. I don't know if they would go out and get him because if you guys go back and watch, if you guys have League Pass, why don't you go watch the games between the Charlotte Hornets and the Detroit Pistons and really focus in on Isaiah Stewart and Miles Bridges? I don't think they like each other. Because every game I watched, they were getting in fights. Him and Jalen Duren. I mean, you watch, I don't know what was said. Obviously, basketball is a very competitive game. Yeah. But, Miles Bridges went to Michigan State. We all know. But I think from a basketball perspective, a fit makes sense. But again, the off the court stuff, especially what the organization is still going through with, a former assistant GM.
Yeah,
I don't know, man. I don't know. I mean, but beggars can't be choosers either. So you never know what'll happen.
That's the other thing. Because I was saying, I think that, and this is me again. This is not me saying I have intel on this. So I want people to get this clear. I'm not saying I have intel on this. I'm just of the personal mindset that a large reason the Pistons probably did not even go entertain Ime Udoka is because of the situation they're in. They need to move far away from as much bad PR as possible.
Yeah, I agree. But I would also say, like, we didn't really get too much coverage of Troy Weaver saying I'll kick a fan's ass either. Oh man, I was surprised honestly that the NBA didn't like suspend or fine him, but they probably didn't even like get notice of that at all. It was very like
that was a pretty wild situation. That was a tough article to write.
I bet, man. One of our subscribers on this channel actually has season tickets right by where that happened, and he said that fan went to Troy 6 times, kept coming down the stairs to talk shit to him, and by the 6th time, Troy just lost his shit. It's crazy.
Yeah, we don't know the whole conversation. We don't know what that fan might have said. So I'm gonna leave that one alone.
Yeah, same here.
I'm still here. There we go. I had to get some light in here.
I mean, it's getting okay. It's only like 8:30. I thought it was later.
Yeah, I was trying to use the sun. I was trying to avoid cutting the light on and using the natural light, but yeah, that was a fail.
It's all good. Do you have time for like maybe 1 or 2 Q&A questions from the viewers that are watching right now?
Hey man, I'm here. I carved out, like I said, my day to hop on, so I'm here.
Awesome, man. Like I said, the people love having you on. We appreciate all 650 you guys watching right now. So we got a question from the boy Juicy. That's a goated YouTube name. Shout out. He said, "What's the deal with Wiseman? We need a backup who plays defense. Wiseman right now is nothing more than a third center on our team." So I don't know if you want to take that one. I mean, I have my opinions with Wiseman, but I'd love to hear your perspective with it.
I think Wiseman is an interesting situation. First off, you have to look at what Wiseman came into the league. And he came into the league with the Golden State Warriors, and the Golden State Warriors were not focused on developing stars. They were focused on winning, on keeping their dynasty rolling. So right now, what you're getting out of James Wiseman is, yeah, there are some things you would think that because he's a second overall pick, that he would know that instinctively coming to the league, but he was still very young. And you're now really starting to see this guy even though he credits the Warriors developing, I forgot the name of their late coach that passed away because he was really fond of him. But you're really starting to see Wiseman kind of come along in the past couple of games, tail end of the season under Mark Bryant. And he still defensively, he still has some lapses. I mean, I think that's obvious. He's also could use some more work in the low post offensively. That's the one thing some of those Pistons bigs are missing. They're missing some low post moves. They're more aggressive, but they're missing some low post moves. So they didn't offer him the rookie extension. So I mean, I think that's a scenario where they might look to see if they can get better, and then if they can't, I mean, he's still there. So I mean, but he loves it here. But I mean, again, this is not about just having a guy who loves it. You need a guy that can produce. And to the boy Juicy's comment, I mean, yeah, you got to get somebody in here that can produce, because right now we're at a point where it's past projects.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you in terms of just the bigs not really having a low post game. And I guess that's to be expected with them being very young. And I think that's a big reason why they brought in Taj Gibson. Because Taj Gibson during his day was a very good power forward center. And Mark Bryant did wonders with all the bigs, Isaiah Stewart, James Wiseman, and Jalen Duren. I will say, though, the deal with Wiseman is they didn't want to give him that qualifying offer because the qualifying offer was 13, almost 14 million.
Can't do
That's
it.
that's a lot. He would have been making more than Bagley, and he was the second overall pick, so his rookie scale contract was already incredibly high. It was very similar to Marvin Bagley's.
Mm-hmm.
If the Pistons were to bring James Wiseman back, I think it would be in a very budget-friendly, really low contract. And to your point, I think it's if they just, strike out on free agency. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to bringing Andre Drummond back. Personally, if you want to go down that route, you want to bring back a backup center that's been here, very familiar with the city. I think he's an underrated passer. I think defensively, he had his lapses here where he wasn't locked in. But if you're offering Drummond like a lower tier contract, maybe he would like to come back to Detroit. And I'm sure Tom Gores would sign off on that 100%. He loves Andre.
I think not even just Gores would sign off on that on the heartbeat. I think Andre Drummond would sign off that on the heartbeat. I've just seen this guy just in the back when he comes here for Pistons Bulls game, just seeing the way the guy is interacting with everybody in the back. It's like he's still here. Remember, this guy was heartbroken when they got rid of him. So a piece of him is still here in Detroit. And to your point, I believe he's a better player now and a more mature player now than he was when he left here. Maybe he won't be able to be the guy that aid Jalen Duren in some low post moves, but defensively, you can't really say that Andre Drummond was bad. I mean, this guy was a rebounding machine. He was solid in low post. So if they're able to get him to come back, and if you had to choose between bringing back Andre Drummond and bringing back Wiseman, I believe bringing back Andre Drummond would be solid move. Savvy veteran. He's better than his last couple of stops. His Bulls run has been very solid.
Yeah, I think some people maybe they forget, but they started running more DHO offenses with Drummond, and I think that's something that Monty tried to do in the beginning of the year with Duren and Stewart. I just don't think that they were, ready for that responsibility. They had Cade, initiate the offense more. But I mean, if that's something that, like, if you pull up the tape on Drummond, his last, year or so here, he learned the dribble handoff offense, and there were games where you have 5, 6, 7 assists. Like, I think he could handle it. He had chemistry with Cade Cunningham. If you guys do remember last summer, Andre Drummond's trainer is Stanley Remy. And Cade Cunningham goes down to those runs, and there are runs where Cade Cunningham and Andre Drummond were on the same team, and the chemistry was instant. Cade was throwing him lobs, Drummond was setting him screens. I think it would be a perfect fit in Detroit if Drummond does want to come back, but at the end of the day, it is up to him. But if you do kind of look at the free agent centers, I mean, obviously, like Nick Claxton is probably going to command the bag. I doubt the Pistons want to go out and get a Jonas Valanciunas, but hey, who knows? Maybe they just want to, impactful win now center, but you never really know. I think Drummond is a sneaky name to look out for if you are a Piston fan.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I believe that's a great one.
I think it would be a good center, too, for Jalen Duren to learn under. Mm-hmm. Because personally, I don't really think Jalen Duren had the luxury to learn under a veteran center. And I think that's something that maybe the organization should have prioritized personally, because maybe he wouldn't have the defensive lapses that he had this season. Because there've been, I mean, you cover the team, you go to the games, like, his rookie year, he was blocking everything. This year, there was just such, defensive lapses where guys were going by him. He wasn't blocking shots. Wasn't really, his effort level.
It was like I'm not gonna say it's lapses isn't right, because I don't want to say a guy took a play off, but it was just like, what happened? I mean, 2 games ago, you were looking like the next great center of the league, and in this game, like you just said, guys are blowing past you. Guys are dunking on you. Guys are having their way with you in the post.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there's some sneaky names out there. I know I mentioned Hartenstein at the top of the podcast. I don't think the Knicks are going to let him go. I really don't. I think he's just such a crucial part of the Knicks, center rotation. Him and Mitchell Robinson, I think, are just such crucial pieces. I'd find it really hard to believe for them to let Hartenstein go. I think they would trade Mitchell Robinson before they let Hartenstein go. That's just me, though.
I can see that.
Let's see. That's a good question from Red Baron. He said, "What's our path to recoup our first round draft capital without trading our core?" That's a loaded question. I don't even know if it's possible personally.
It's not. It's just not. I don't. Hey, Red Baron Arcade. I respect the question. It's not possible. It's just.
Yeah, I mean, like the Stewart trade at the time didn't really seem like too bad of a trade, but it's still affecting, potential or future trades you can actually make because it's so weird to wrap your brain around, but stay with me. The Pistons can trade the draft pick they select, but they can't physically trade the draft pick in this year's draft. So let's say they win the lottery. They can select Alex Sarr and trade him, but they can't trade the first round pick before the NBA draft. It's so weird to try to wrap your brain around.
It's a weird thing. Yeah.
I don't know.
But basically, if you're making that deal, it's amazing. Basically, you'll probably be drafted for somebody else, then moving.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only way you can recoup your first round pick, your first round draft capital, is you'd have to actually trade your core. And to your question, you're like, without trading the core, I don't think there's anyone on this team that could garnish you a first round pick. I don't even think Isaiah Stewart could get you a first round pick. It would be a really late first round pick.
Yeah, it's yeah.
We'll do one more question, and I think this is a question you'll like answering. This comes from Eastside Chris. Kory, for a guy covering two teams, when do y'all beat writers get a break from the game?
Okay. I really don't get a break. I really don't get a break. I'm not going like I'm gonna just sit up here and you can clip this and you can tag them to it. And I don't get it twisted. I love covering the Lions. I love covering the Pistons. But when you ask me about getting a break, and I envy guys like Omari, I envy James Edwards because they cover one team and I'm not saying don't get it twisted. Those guys work hard. They work hard, and you see it in their writing, you see it in the way they cover the team. But they also get a little bit of a reprieve. As soon as the Pistons end, I'm going into football stuff, and I'm covering football predominantly. I'm going to be covering NBA free agency and everything like that, Pistons media day and stuff like that. But I'm outside that, I'm going right into football. And then from football, when football's over, I'm going right into basketball. So to answer your question, my break comes in the first couple of weeks in July because that is kind of when that's after OTAs with the Lions and that's after rookie minicamp. And then I get a little bit of reprieve. So I'm gonna be taking my vacation the first couple of weeks of July. And after that, I'm getting ready for a whole month of training camp with the Lions. So other guy, a couple of months, me, I have July.
I mean, then you got Summer League too. Like, it's crazy, man.
I don't. You ever seen the Popeyes meme of the lady with her head down?
Yeah.
That's me. That's me.
Yeah, man. Like I get it. Covering two teams is probably extremely stressful, and I know you're in college too. Like that's crazy. And you have a child that you're trying to support and take care of. And like I know that like those 20-minute naps come in clutch. when you can't get them. Like, trust me, like it's insane. I know how much work you put in. Getting to work with you when we were both at that former company that we did used to work for. I know how much work you put in. Clipping everything, getting articles up. Like, when I say Kory is one of the hardest working people in the city, he's one of the hardest working people in the city. And even when I text him, he still does find the time to text me back if I do have a question or if I want to talk shit or something like that. he'll still reply to me. Like I said, you're one of my favorite people that I have on this podcast, and people enjoy having you on too.
Thanks. I love being on, but yeah, man, it's hard because the thing about it is you're gonna miss something when you're covering two teams, and it's a challenge because I want to stay up on everything. I don't want to have somebody like, hey, you saw this happen. I'm like, no, that happened. Because I'm covering one sport and I missed something in another sport, but I'm making it work the best way I can. It's a challenge, but I mean, if I would say it's rewarding trying to figure it out. It's rewarding.
Yeah. I mean, I don't work as hard as you, but I do have 3 jobs. I work in high school sports. Like this week, I think we covered 12 baseball games, and it's absolutely insane. Yeah, and then like trying to prep for this podcast, like I was doing baseball game stuff, but I was making thumbnails, I was making templates, lower thirds, doing topics while I was at the baseball game, while I was doing baseball game stuff. It was like, I gotta get this shit done, because if I don't get it done, it's not going to. But like I said, it's always good to have you on. Now, I do have your Twitter and I have your MLive profile down below in the description for people that want to follow you on.
Real quick.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say this real quick that kind of round up the end part of it. I tell you right now, the Pistons better not do nothing this week during the draft. If they do something crazy during this week in the draft, I'm gonna just throw my hands up like Shelton on what's that Big Bang Theory?
I completely forgot.
This week in the draft, please.
I completely forgot about the NFL draft. I really have. That's next week, isn't it?
This week, yeah, right. Like stuff is starting tomorrow. Starting tomorrow, things are kicking off from an NFL draft coverage. So I hope the Pistons just wait till next week to announce this hire, because it's overloaded over here.
I wouldn't be too worried, man. They don't do anything fast. I mean, they say they want to have urgency, but I mean, look at Brooklyn. They've already hired a new coach, an assistant coach, and Pistons probably won't make a decision until like May, knowing them. They don't do anything fast.
Yeah.
But man, that NFL draft is going to be crazy. RIP to try to find a parking space down there.
I'm not parked. I'm getting dropped off. I'm not driving down there.
It should be cool. I feel like they haven't really had an event since like the Super Bowl in terms of just like football in Detroit.
I got and speaking of that draft, I got when we log off, I got something to do. Find pretty interesting. And fans, you will see that coming later on in the week. I just can't tell you what's going on right now, but I'll tell Ant when we get up there.
For sure. I do have your Twitter in the description below for people that do want to follow you on Twitter. I think if you like the Detroit Lions and you like the Detroit Pistons and maybe an occasionally spicy tweet from Kory, definitely give him a follow. I also have your MLive articles in your profile down below for people that do want to keep up with your work at mlive.com. And I will give you the floor if you want to plug anything you're working on, NFL draft related or Detroit Pistons related or anything. So the floor is yours for everyone that is watching.
First off, thanks again for having me on the pod. It's always fun as always. Right now, I'm working on my end of season wrap up. I'm still, writing a couple of things out, looking at a few things, deciding if I want to go for a card preview. Probably going to be not preview, review. So it's probably I'm gonna probably have my report card up by tomorrow or Tuesday. As far as the draft stuff, I have a lot of interesting stuff coming up this week, so just stay tuned. I'm going to a couple of VIP parties with some names that I'm not at liberty to say, and there will be some interview opportunities for those as well. So you guys really want to stay. Just peep on my Twitter, man. I'm gonna have some content for you guys to go along with the writing, and I have a Pistons mailbag out right now that I'm trying to drop in the morning. So if you have a question regarding the team, he said my Twitter information is right there. Go hit my Twitter right now, and I would love to answer more of your Pistons questions so I can drop this mailbag in the morning. So go hit that thing right now, and you might see your question drop the article tomorrow morning.
Well, we appreciate you having on. Appreciate 700 people tonight. We appreciate all of you guys watching. Crazy. 700 people when NBA playoffs are happening, man. Like, what?
That's nuts.
Love all you guys that are tapping in, watching the podcast tonight. I will be dropping the podcast audio if you guys want to listen to the audio side.
I'm sorry, I just saw something in the comments for Organic Lindo. That's hilarious.
I know. That's why I was laughing earlier.
I'm not saying
Organic Lindo. I mean, shout out to him, man. He shows up every week. Honestly, man, I got to buy him a drink one of these days. But I'm not going to read that comment. But we'll drop the audio side of the podcast in the morning. Again, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys next week.